In this video, we're going to learn about objects and object-oriented programming. So up until now, we've been programming in what's known as the procedural design paradigm, where the focus is on designing procedures that take in data as input, process that input, and then turn it into some output data. But in this paradigm, procedures are considered to be separate from the data that they operate on. Today, however, we're going to take a first look at object-oriented programming, in which the focus is on creating interacting objects, where objects are these complex data types that contain both the data and the behavior that operates on it. Okay. Now, the data and behaviors are known as attributes and methods when we're talking about object-oriented programming. So there's a number of different advantages when we're constructing programs in this new paradigm. There's encapsulation, which points out that objects are both state and behavior combined, whereas state are the variables in those objects called the data attributes, also sometimes called fields. And these represent information about that entity. Whereas the behavior, these are functions in the object known as methods when we're talking about object-oriented programming. These represent things that the entity can do. Oftentimes, that behavior, though, is dependent on the current values of the object's attributes. So, because all these things are stored in one spot, though, the code is more easily designed, easier to organize, and easier to debug once things ultimately go wrong. So, for example, consider a bicycle object. It has attributes like the number of gears, size of tires, the current gear, things like that. And then has behaviors like the ability to change the current gear or to pedal forward for speed. That's all contained in one entity. Now, there's a bunch of other advantages. There's the naturalness. So the design of objects it more closely aligns with how humans already conceive of the world. So it's a more natural way to think about problems and the solutions that we create. For example, in procedural programming, if we wanted to represent, let's say, some sort of microwave simulation, we're trying to program a microwave. In procedural programming, we'd have a standalone cook function into which we pass all the information, which would be something representing a microwave and something representing a food item. And we'd say cook, and then as parameters, microwave, comma, food. And it seems a bit clunky. In object-oriented programming, however, we create a microwave object that has a cook behavior or a cook method, and into that we'd pass a food item. So we'd say microwave.cook and then pass it some food, which is a much more natural way. We conceive the microwave being there as a standalone, has the behavior for cooking, and we pass food into it. So the design of programs aligns with how we already think about these things in the real world. Other advantages is objects offer abstraction. So there's a simple interface of methods that separate the world outside the object from the potentially complex behaviors inside that object. So the object itself offers this interface that abstracts away all the unnecessary details inside the object. They're easy to interact with without having to understand how they necessarily work. And lastly, reusability here. Objects describe the idea of an entity, or rather classes, as we'll see, describe the idea of these entities, and then we can make many individual objects that all have this same design or the same structure. Same set of attributes, maybe different values for their attributes, but the same set of attributes, and it's very easy to just factory produce as many of these as we like. So we can specify what it is to be a bicycle, and then very easily make several different bicycles using this object-oriented design. So we've seen some objects already up till this point. We've seen lists and strings. We'll ignore strings being objects because they're also primitive types, but lists make a really good example. So a list is an object that models a sequence of values. Okay? It contains data attributes that are all of its elements, so the element at index 0 and index 1 and so on. It has a lot of methods for doing sorts of list things like appending and popping. It's great for doing general purpose usage in a lot of different problem domains. It represents a sequence of values. It does that very well. But what we're going to do in this lecture is learn how to make our own custom objects to suit whatever specific problem or specific purpose we're trying to solve. Okay. So to do that, objects work by first defining classes. So classes represent the idea of a real-world entity, sort of in the abstract sense. You can think of classes like a cookie cutter or a factory that creates the specific objects. So the classes specify what attributes and methods should be in the objects. Another way of thinking of it is a class defines a new data type, kind of like how integer is the data type for integers, and 3 would be a specific value of that data type. So a class defines a new data type for a bicycle or a person, and then there's specific values of those called objects. So objects are the specific values or the instances of a class, like the cookies that come out of the cookie cutter. So we say objects are instances of a class. We could create, for example, 3 objects from the same class, and each would be a separate instance that's unique unto itself. So each object has its own scope, which means each object has its own separate version of its attributes, its own internal variables. But they all share the same behaviors, the same sorts of functions that you can apply to those values, but they'll act in different ways dependent on their current states. So, for example, we could create a person class that describes what it means to be a person, create attributes like the name, maybe a mood, an eye color, things like this, and some behaviors as well, like what it means to dance or to smile or to laugh. And then we could create specific person objects. So we'd have Alice, Bob, and Charlie. They all have separate names. They have separate moods. Alice looks pretty happy, Charlie not so much. And separate colors. In this case, Alice is blue, Charlie is red, Bob is green. So classes are the general idea. They're the definition of what it means to be a thing, and then objects are the specific instances of those classes. So let's see how we can define some classes. Here is the syntax for defining a class in Python. So remember, class sets the template for the objects that we're going to want. So it starts with the keyword class, kind of like if we're defining a function, we have the keyword def. This just has to be there to say we're defining now one new class. Now what follows that is the class name. Now the class name has the same rules as a variable name, but by convention should always start with an uppercase letter. That specifies that it is representing a class and not, say, a function or something else. So always start your class names with an uppercase letter. Okay. And then what follows that is the class body, and that's everything inside the class, and we'll see a lot of other things that can go into there, but here we just have one method known as the initializer. So the initializer starts with the keyword def, as all functions do, but then has a very special name, underscore, underscore, init, underscore, underscore. So 2 underscores, the word init, and then 2 more underscores. So it's a very specific name. This is known as the initializer, or the constructor in some other languages. This is a special method that's going to initialize new objects for us. So when we want to create a specific person or a specific bicycle, the class will run through this initializer to do so. So it does have a very odd name, but it is mandatory, and it runs automatically, as we'll see a little bit later on. When we want to create a new object, it'll run through this initializer to set up the starting conditions for that object. Now, in the parameters for the initializer, we need to have at very least one of these, but we can have optionally more if we want to. We'll talk about more later on. So for now, we have to have at least one parameter, and that parameter is typically called self. Now, technically, you can give it any name, but I recommend always just sticking with the convention here. This self parameter here represents the object that's being created. So if we're creating some new object, it's going to be passed into this initializer method as this variable self, and then we're going to do things to that object to set up its initial conditions. And later on, we'll see that we can also add some other additional parameters as well. Okay. Now, inside the body of this initializer is the steps taken to set up the values or the attributes of that new object. So if self is our new person object, then we'll need to give self a new name, for example. So we'd say self.name equals, and then Alice, or whatever name we're creating. So self is the name of our object, .attr is the name of the new attribute we want to create. Here is just the generic attribute, but if we're creating a person, for example, this would be self.name. If we're creating a bike, for example, this could be self.numGears, something like that. Something that sets up a variable that holds information about this object. All right, so let's stop talking about this in the abstract. Let's go see an example. So a new class here, we're going to call it dog.py. So in this new function, or in this new file rather, we're going to create a dog class. So it starts with the keyword class, and then the name of our class, in this case dog, with an uppercase D to represent that we're representing a class here, not something else. And now when we're constructing our class, and just like when we're constructing functions, it's a good idea to document these. So I'm going to put in a docstring here, the class docstring in this case, that describes what this class will do. So this class describes the pattern for dog objects one or more objects, to be used for instructional purposes. There you go. So if we were creating a more involved thing, maybe we'd say something more, more eloquent. But in this case, that's all this is going to be used for. So let's just say that. Now, we've set up that we were defining a class. So let's now define that initializer method. So def underscore underscore init, and then 2 more underscores. And then in the parameters, we need to at least have self, and that's all we're going to include for now, just the parameter self. And now we describe what this method's going to do. So this method is the initializer for new dog objects. So this tells us what new dog objects are going to be like. Now, in order to actually do that, let's set up some values. So set some default attributes into our dog object. So now again, this initializer method is going to run when we want to create a new dog, and that new dog object will be called self as far as this initializer is called. So we have this local variable self that represents a new dog object. So we'll say dogs have an age, and we'll give it the default value of 0 because we don't know anything about this specific dog. And we'll say they have a name, but we don't have a specific name, so default value of an empty string. Okay. So yeah, the initializer or the constructor is the special functions used to initialize new dog objects when we make them. Self is that new dog object. And then to that new dog object, we're going to apply some default values, which means all new dog objects that get created will run through this method and get an age and a name parameter, or a name and an age attribute. All right, so this is not a complete program, but let's see what it does. So let's go to our terminal here. List, and we got dog.py. So if we run python dog.py, absolutely nothing happens. So it's kind of like we've set up a function, but we never called that function. We've defined a class, but we haven't yet used that class. We've said this is what it means to be a dog as far as our program's concerned, but we haven't actually tried to create any dogs yet. So now we're ready to create some objects, but let's see the syntax of that first. So to create an object, first things first is we call the class like a function. So on the previous slide, we saw class name. So we've defined what it means to be an object of type class name. In this case, we're going to create a specific object. So we call class name with parameters here, or sorry, with the parentheses here. And that's going to create a new object, run it through the initializer, and return it. So the thing that we'll get here is the initialized object. Okay. Next, we can then use that object by accessing its attributes. So we use dot notation here to access attributes. So we say object dot attribute. So if this is a dog, we'd say dog dot name, for example, to print its name. And these things they work like variables. They're variables that are stored inside the object, but beyond that, they have regular variable behaviors. We can store things in them the same way we've done before. So if we want to change that attribute, we could say object.attribute equals, and then give it some new value. All right, so back to our dog example. Let's create a main method here. So down out in the global space, we'll say def main. So not inside the class, it's separate from the class. We're going to say def main, and inside main, I'm just going to create a dog. So I'll say my dog equals dog. Okay. What this does, so notice this matches the class name here. What this does is it creates a new object and passes that object into init here. But now notice we didn't pass in anything to dog. Right, we just said call the class dog, which automatically creates an object and passes it in as self. So we don't have to supply the parameter for self. Python's going to do that for us. So self represents some new object. We're going to attach an age and a name to that object. And then notice we didn't also say return down here. We didn't say return self. That again is done automatically by Python. So when it gets to the end of this initializer method, that returns the self object. And that's what we're storing here as my dog. So if we want, for example, we can do some stuff like print the dog's name. So print mydog.name and print mydog.age. There you go. So we use dot notation here. So we called the dog class to create a dog object, which we then named my dog. So then to access the name of that, we could say my dog dot, which says go into that object. and look for something called name. Look for an attribute called name. Now we happen to create an attribute here, which was empty, but we should be able to run this and still see an empty line print out. Similarly with age, we have a default value of 0, but we access that from this specific dog object. And let's run this to see what happens. And there we go. We print out the name, which is empty, and the age, which is 0. So not terribly informative yet, but let's now mutate this a little bit. So let's say mydog.name equals Chewbacca. And then mydog.age, we'll say he's 7 years old. Now if we take these same two print statements and try them again, save and run, we get the initial values, which were empty, but now we've changed those values to be Chewbacca and 7. So we've stored these two pieces of information, name and age, together in this one variable called mydog. So if we want to access the name, we say mydog.name. Want to access the age, mydog.age. All right. So that covers the basics for creating and constructing classes and objects. It's the end of this video. In the next video, we'll go into more detail about what we can do with these things.